Okay, QM community, that was pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. And great voice of God. That's much improved over when you did that for Deb. So I get the pleasure to introduce some amazing people, but before I do that, I want to thank the QM community for bringing us all together for this invigorating focus on milestones, momentum, and innovation. I'm Whitney Kilgore. I'm the co-founder and chief academic officer at iDesign, and we're known for instructional design support of community colleges, HBCUs, state universities, and small private colleges, as well as R1s. But we're also known for a new software tool called Align that showcases alignment to accreditation standards. And if there's one thing I know instructional designers love, it's the word alignment. So if you'd like to know more about that, we'll be here through noon tomorrow. We're also working with accreditation standards, workforce skills, frameworks, and taxonomies. So I have had the pleasure of being a part of this amazing community since 2008. When I was first introduced to the QM rubric and the professional development provided by QM. And today I have the honor and privilege of introducing a number of panelists that have been involved in QM for a rather long time as well. First up, Cristi Ford. If you would join me on the stage. Cristi Ford is currently the Vice President of Academic Affairs at D2L and has served in a variety of senior leadership roles across higher education and K-12. And most of you already know Cristi, so that's probably enough. She's famous. Infamous just flew in from Europe even, where she was moderating panels, doing fireside chats, and I think even interviewing the CEO
and had
of D2L.
I had high tea as well.
Yeah, high tea at noon. Yeah, and I think saw Tina Turner musical. Ask her more about that after. But Shannon Riggs, if you'll join us up here too. Shannon. Shannon serves as the Associate Vice Provost of Educational Programs and Learning Innovation for Oregon State University and the Division of Educational Ventures. Shannon's actually responsible for expanding educational programs and credentials across Oregon State's campuses and education platforms. And in case you didn't know, just 2 weeks ago, she won the Dick Johnson and Molly McGill Award at WCET, and that is their highest honor for leadership and service. So. And if she doesn't look like Luke Dowden, who you may have seen in the program, that's because Luke couldn't be here today. And we're just so grateful that you were able to join us. And last up on the stage, Dr. MJ Bishop, our Quality Matters Board Chair, correct? Quality Matters Board Chair. Yep. And Vice President of UMGC's Integrative Learning Design Unit. She's got a long history of collaboration with Quality Matters and a deep understanding of the higher ed landscape. She joined the Maryland system in 2013, right? Leading the Kirwan Center for Academic Innovation. But you may not know, she won the Young Scholar Award from AECT in 2001. Yeah, I did dig for that one. That was fun. So this afternoon, we aim to be provocative so that we start a conversation rather than finish it. And while we all have some K-12 experiences, some of us as teachers in K-12 and experiences in media services and technologies, we actually come to this conversation with a pretty deep higher education background. So in the Q&A portion, if you have questions about K-12 or want to have that conversation, we'd love to stimulate those questions too. So we have more questions than answers, like, are frameworks limiting our creativity? Is technology keeping us from thinking outside the affordances that it provides? Are we stuck in the past, or are we ready for the future? And most importantly, what is quality and who defines it? The workforce is changing, job descriptions are shifting, and we're seeing a need for 1 to 3 years of experience for many jobs. No longer are those jobs requiring a degree in many cases. So how can we ensure that students have the opportunities to both practice the skills that they're learning and also speak to what they're capable of doing? So thinking about humans as lifelong learners, we get the opportunity to think about skill assessment, credit for prior learning, competency-based models, upskilling, reskilling. And we have a very uncertain future right now. So we all need to be able to learn and unlearn as we evolve. And higher education can be central to adult knowledge and skill development, but how do we signal quality in a sea of credentials? So there's a great opportunity for us today to really kind of explore some of these questions and probably pose some new ones that we haven't thought about yet. So with that, welcome to our panel, Back to the Future. Have we boxed ourselves in, or can quality matters serve as a guidepost on the path forward? So as I throw out some provocative questions, if you have more you'd like to add to your bio, like any awards you won before 2001,
Right.
please do just put those right out there.
I was
But
born in Evanston, Illinois.
thank you. So let me start off with MJ and we can kind of go down the line, but how should we, higher education or K-12 education at large, adapt our frameworks so that we match the pace of change?
Easy. Okay, next pass.
Pass. Okay, Chris.
No, I've been giving this a little bit of thought. So as Whitney mentioned, I was working at our system office in Maryland for about 10 years prior to going to UMGC. Where, as many of you are aware, we deliver and design instruction for delivery at scale, and are working at a pace and at a scale that sometimes even takes my breath away when I stop to think about it. And I think as I've been reflecting on over 30 years of instructional design work prior to going to Maryland, I was at Lehigh University. I taught instructional design, my doctorate's in instructional design. I trained master's and doctoral level instructional designers for many years. I don't know that it had ever occurred to me that as, the rest of the world is evolving, that, as instructional designers, we don't do an awful lot to evolve our models in the ways that we probably ought to. And I think what's really salient for me and has become really impressed upon me in this new environment at UMGC is that there are things that we're going to have to back off on that I would say are really good instructional design practices, but that don't make it particularly efficient or practical for us to deliver that content at scale. And a really just quick concrete example of this. We do a lot with OERs, as many of you know who do a lot with OERs. They break a lot. We have links that go down and lots of issues. We're committed to them as a model, but generally speaking, they can be fairly high maintenance. From an instructional design standpoint, I can remember teaching this to my students. You want to provide links to materials and make sure they have the learning resources in every possible place that a learner could possibly need them. Well, when you translate, those broken links over 45 times that you've made them available to students in a course, that suddenly becomes a real maintenance problem. And when you're talking about 900 courses that need to be updated before the spring term, that's a lot of work to be done. So I'm thinking that, this is one example of the kind of way in which we need to start sort of rethinking some things, and figuring out what's the optimally effective compromise we have to make in order to make this work in our new environments.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting how small this community is, and that you and I had an opportunity to work together.
Yeah.
When you were at the system office and I was at UMGC for many years. And I think about the work I did in East Africa as chief academic officer of a women's college there. And so when I thought about this question for me, I really thought about the pace of change and the ways in which we think about sustainability, the ways we think about the things in this country, but globally, how that world is closing. And we really have to start, I like what you said about really changing our own methodologies around thinking about this work. I remember back in 2008, when I started to talk about andragogical and heutagogical approaches. Heutagogical, right? And thinking about that self-directed learning and the frameworks and theories around that. But to be able to get our learners where they need to go, to have a living wage in East Africa, or to find the students that we're serving at a UMGC, I think we're going to have to make that shift and really think about, what does quality mean today? It's a different component than it was 10 or 15 years ago, and how we define that, and who at the table now is making a decision in terms of the outcome of that quality. I think it's really shifting the conversation quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that.
Yeah. At Oregon State, we're really, you mentioned and part of a division of educational ventures. That's pretty new in the last couple months. Prior to that, we were focused solely on online learning. But we've kind of expanded our repertoire basically, and we are working with alternative credentials now, and we are working with corporate education and some workforce development and looking at how we can meet the needs of modern learners. So not just degree programs, but also shorter term credentials that, people who are coming back after they've earned their bachelor's degree and they need to upskill or reskill. And just kind of standing up those kinds of new credentials and programs. So I think about how we need to adapt as higher education. I'm thinking of the 18 to 24 months that it takes to get a new program approved in our system. And I know I'm probably not alone in that, that we just really, we need to be more efficient. But then I also think we need to balance that with the value of just the involvement of faculty in the process. It's really easy at conferences like this to talk about faculty slow things down and everything, but there's value in that, and there's value in the faculty participation, and there's rigor that is added. There's value to it. So I think balancing becoming more efficient with maintaining that value of that faculty involvement is the challenge that's ahead of us.
Absolutely. And from an iDesign perspective, right now, today, we're working with 54 different university partners. And so our lens is really unique and different because every university is completely different from one another, and they want to
Sure,
be.
we're all
And
snowflakes.
right, exactly. And the students that they serve are very niche and different as well. And so we were just having a conversation earlier about a student-centered approach to design means something very different at an HBCU than it does at a community college, as it does at an R1. And the expectations for how students are connecting is changing as well. So we have a lot of mobile first initiatives, right? So there are so many things for us to talk about. We could go down that rabbit hole for a long time, but I'll jump to the next question. And Cristi, we'll start with you. What's a quality signal in a sea of credentials, and what's the role for Quality Matters?
That's, I love this question because I think, as I said earlier, I think the signals around quality have shifted. I think that the user voice, the ways that we're thinking about who owns the end of that process has changed. And so hearing you, Shannon, talk about how we're taking too long to produce these degrees, I also wonder, are we taking too long and are we producing the right skills for learners to be successful when they leave us, right? If that's in postgraduate school, if that's getting a job, we talk, Minja, you and I talk a lot about the skills forward approach and this chasm between employers and higher education institutions. And so I think that if we talk about micro-credentials, if we talk about regular traditional courses, there is a need to redefine what quality looks like, because information is currency and it's available everywhere now in a way that it wasn't 30, 40 years ago, right? Like I remember taking typing class in high school and not having access to the internet. And so we have to change and think about the ways in which we signal quality and what does that actually mean? How is quality actually now defined?
Did you get the questions in advance? That was a good answer.
MJ, in order for this to be provocative, I think I have to ask you as the chair of the board, what does this mean for QM?
Yeah, it's a really good question because, I think the quality conversation is happening now at all different levels in our institutions. And I think that QM, and we've been talking about this on the board, needs to find ways to engage our senior leaders across our institutions in understanding, this is going to be a critical component of our success moving forward. And, that quality discussion needs to be about, I love the framing that Lumina did a few years back on this, that's two sides of the same coin, quality and equity. And that if it's not about student success, at the same time, it's about us thinking about quality, we're really missing the mark. So, I think there are lots of conversations for us to have to expand the role that QM could play in, the larger ecosystem and environment in our higher ed institutions. And that's something at least that we're exploring at this point.
Yeah, excellent. So Shannon, over to you. How are your institutions working to ensure a quality learning experience in micro or short-term type learning environments?
Yeah, well, we are really just getting started on this journey. We began with a micro-credential pilot. We're almost at the end of our 2-year pilot and have made the decision with this expansion of our division and a new alternative credential unit to go all in and really develop in this area. And I may have my, rose-colored glasses on right now, but I feel like we started our QM initiative in, I think it was 2013. So we've got a good 10 years in, and it's spread throughout our faculty. It's really, it's ingrained, it's in everything that we do. And I feel like that really gives us a good foundation for moving forward, because we are accustomed to having a common vocabulary when we're talking about quality. We have used the higher ed rubric to paint a picture of what does good quality online course design look like. At our institution, we even have built upon that to create some online teaching principles, because we were so steeped in the QM design standards and so used to having that common language that we felt a need and heard a need from our faculty and from our college partners for a similar kind of set of standards for teaching. And so we've created those standards to kind of help paint that picture. And I feel like that's the next step for us for what we need to do for alternative credentials. But in our institutional culture, we're used to having those standards and they're evidence and research based. And so, the first time we had to adopt those standards, that was the really hard work. Now we know we need them, and we just have to figure out what are the right ones for alternative credentials.
I have a feeling there are going to be a lot of questions for you when we pause for questions at the end relative to this pilot. But Cristi, I wonder, from a micro-credentialing, alternative credential kind of environment, at D2L, you have a totally different lens.
Yes.
What are you seeing as far as the shift to short form courses?
Yes. You read my mind. I wanted you to ask me that question because when I made the shift, colleagues, to the dark side, right, to become a part of D2L 15 months ago, shout out to our work that we're doing in D2L for Business. We are really seeing that institutions are really redefining the value proposition that they're offering those learners. I'd say in the last 6 to 9 months, I have done 15 to 20 presentations for institutions around how do I determine upskilling? How am I thinking about non-credential, alternative credentials? How am I thinking about how I can, rebrand and really kind of go back to some of the early days around non-credentialed, areas of workforce development. So we're seeing a huge shift there.
Yeah.
Where institutions are really trying to make a move in that direction.
Yeah. And that question wasn't prepared in advance.
It was not.
MJ, that was on the fly, but that's because I'm seeing it too. And after listening to Shannon tell her story, I was like, there's a big change in the market. And now we want to hear all about what UMGC is doing with the kind of catalog platform of opportunities in a B2B.
And as I'm sitting here, I'm reflecting on the conversation so far, and we've been sort of talking about degrees and credentials, and a term that I really love that I can't take credit for. James Devaney was using this a couple of years ago at Michigan. He's been thinking more in terms of a curriculum portfolio, and that's a term that we've adopted in a big way at UMGC, where what we're doing is okay, we're still, obviously, under the federal regulations and state regulations and everything else, bound to create degree programs and go through our accreditation and all those sorts of things. But we're trying under the hood to be talking more with our faculty and our program directors who we partner with on development about what would this whole curriculum portfolio look like? And how might we build that in a way that's modular and that allows us, and this is where I think the quality conversation really comes into play, allows us to be a lot more learner-centered. And, what you're talking about in terms of the skills work you do and have been doing so well, Shannon, in recent years in your career, and if Luke were here to speak to the work they're doing there, we've not actually done as much of that in a big way, frankly, at UMGC yet. But I think what we're trying to do is set ourselves up better to be able to do that and to be able to say, okay, when we look at taking a truly learner-centered approach, it's inclusive, it's the things we're offering to learners are relevant, they're outcomes focused, we know where to assess things, it's skills based and skills aligned to what employers are looking for. And if we start thinking about how to create that pool of learning opportunities in a way that makes sense to then create those learner-centered sorts of experiences, That strikes me as a very different kind of view, at least of curriculum design, if not also of instructional design. It introduces a lot of problems, right?
Yeah.
You know, and if Ellen Wagner were here, she'd walk into the room and she'd say, you know, we were doing learning objects in 1980 and we couldn't figure it out then. What makes you think you're going to be able to do it now?
She said that to me last week.
Yeah. Yeah, she tells me that every time I talk.
No lie,
It's like,
last
yeah.
week. Yeah.
Well, we got some new tools, right?
Mhm.
Let's talk, I have to say it, artificial intelligence, okay,
Mhm.
I said it, and blockchain, and then we can go move on. But you know, we took a look around and we said to ourselves, and again, not to plug our external partners here on either side of me, but frankly, we've been looking at, you know, who are the external partners that are going to be able to step up to this and provide us with the platforms we need in order to make this happen. The LMS in its current form isn't going to do it, right? I mean, that's very linear. That's very, you know, course, program, course, program. How do I incorporate modules? How do I, you know, look at this very differently and mix and match this differently? The Align platform is another opportunity that is going to allow us, I think, in the future to begin creating those skills maps that help us figure out how do these things stack together. You know, if they're calling this critical thinking over here and they're calling it a widget over here, but it's the same thing,
Yeah.
they have to call it a widget over here because their accreditor says so. But
Mhm.
I need to know that those are the same things so that I can be able to continue to stack these learning experiences throughout our curriculum portfolio. So that's a different way of looking at things. Sorry. I could
No.
go on for a while, as you can tell.
Yes, and I actually think Shannon wants to add to that, but I would just want to
Jump in.
crystallize your thought with the words that I have heard in your voice in my head for a few months now, which is the Rosetta Stone,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
To try to make sure that we understand how the skills maps
Mhm.
can be prepared in such a way that they relate to the standards.
Yeah.
But there's still opportunities
Yeah.
within the standards and the skills maps to do more.
Not talking about taking away the learning outcomes, the learning
Mhm.
objectives, you know, we spent too much time training faculty how to write those after all, so we should keep them. By golly.
Yeah.
But, no, we're going to continue to need them. And it is a great guide for understanding, you know, how do we, you know, how do we assess, how do we get from A to Z? I mean, all of that still stands. The Rosetta Stone is the thing that translates that into something that students understand.
Meaningful.
So I took a course on the novel as an undergraduate English major. Nobody ever said I got critical thinking skills while I was doing that. Nobody pointed to it. Nobody spoke to it directly. That's the stuff we're talking about.
Go, Shannon.
Yeah, and it's not just topically, but it's at what level. I'm thinking
Right.
we have a faculty review committee for our micro-credentials at my home institution. And right now, we're not using a skills taxonomy. That's one of the things I'm hoping to change this year, that we're going to adopt one. So it's a little Wild West. We're just assigning, and there's a faculty member here from OSU. So let's just keep this here in this room, okay? But but it's a little bit of a Wild West and we need more of a system in order to do this. But it's not just topically, it's what level. So I was sitting in a faculty review committee and one of the comments on you know, one of the micro credentials with the set of skills that was proposed was, I'm not sure this rises to the level of analysis. And it was, you know, it was a really smart comment. And we need to figure that out. We need to build a bridge. And really, I think that's an alignment issue. And if anybody can help us with alignment, we know it's quality matters.
There's a lot more we could dig into there.
Yeah.
So moving on, because I want to make sure that there's enough time for questions. What signaling would be helpful from institutions in evolving the frameworks that we need for future skills? Or future skilling up, upskilling, reskilling, all the skills.
Data.
Yeah.
We need data and research. So it's really, it's like the audience is more complex because it's not just, you know, higher ed professionals and students. Now there's industry. So it's like we're trying to translate 3 different languages across to each other and make them all communicate. But it has to be grounded in research and evidence.
There are a lot of universities that are moving into this B2B space. And MJ, I'm thinking of what Barry is doing and I'm trying to make sure that content from degree programs gets repurposed in a thoughtful way to support the needs of industry. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're obviously, again, taking this curriculum portfolio approach, really exploring the ways in which we can hive off, as Barry would say, portions of those, probably lower level bloom opportunities, make them self-paced and begin. In my mind, I'm hitting the print button and it's going over to some magic B2B platform, Sasha, that that allows students not only to engage in, how to learn pivot tables, as for their own purposes within their own environment, but then we're able to say, hey, and guess what? That's a module that's part of our project management certificate if you're interested in pursuing that further. So, this is another part of that curriculum portfolio management approach, is to really think hard about where in fact, I just sent a note to my provost this morning and said, I'd really like for any program redesign, any new program development we're doing right now, to challenge our faculty to say, listen, there's got to be something embedded in that. I don't care what it is. It's a badge, it's a certificate, it's a non-credit offering, but we want to start doing that and making that a requirement for everything we do.
Stackability, that's,
Yeah.
we are doing the same thing. Yeah.
I would just offer one additional point that I noticed that when talking to institutions, thinking about the employer, thinking about the institution, but there's a space for professional associations that are now getting in the game and saying, how can we also come to the table and be a part of this conversation as we move this forward? So I just want to make sure for that.
Yeah. What do you see that role being? I mean, thinking that the shift, right, and unscripted, here we go. The shift for universities to start thinking about their educational programming as content for businesses to upskill, reskill, retool their current staff. What's that role like for an association?
Yeah, I think if you think about the specialty that associations have in law, in business, they can offer some of that fine detail in ways that sometimes institutions, because you're trying to take care of so many different parts of the puzzle, may not have that opportunity to be able to offer up. One of the things I think is really interesting around the skills forward approach is if you think about the competencies for a UX designer, for instance, the competencies that employer A may need may be different from employer B. The associations may have an opportunity to combine those and really understand, okay, so it may be different for employers, but here are the top 10 that we know are across the industry that we really need to have institutions signaling to.
Yeah, interesting. So as we start thinking about signals around skills, we also think about the challenges related to pedagogical models, the current technology that we have. And Shannon, you made a good point about data. We need some data to drive these conversations. So I just kind of wonder, what's the atomic structure of learning? How do we use the technologies that we have at our fingertips or disposal to repackage and offer those up to different audiences?
Go ahead, Cristi.
No, you go ahead. You have an answer on this one.
Yeah, it's a hard question. It's a really hard question because, and this is the Ellen Wagner conundrum, right? You get too granular and you've lost all context, and then it's meaningless. So that exercise on pivot tables may help me learn functions and features and how to make Excel do what I need it to do. But at the end of the day, I've lost any other context around what I'm going to use it for. And if any of you have tried to learn a software program without actually having a project to do, it's fairly meaningless and pretty quickly forgotten. So yeah, that's the hard part. And I think getting back to the research piece, that's a piece I think we could really use some help with as the technologies have gotten more sophisticated to support our ability to piece these things back together. What is that atomic structure? And, how do we ensure that they can come back together in something meaningful? The way we've been thinking about it is we're thinking about the LMS is to say, okay, so we pull these pieces apart and then likely they will be recombined into something that has a wrapper around it that creates that additional context. We're going to need technologies and tools that help to support that. A model that I loved when I was coding some time ago. God, this really is dating me. Does anybody here remember a product called Metropolis? It was sort of brought out. Yes, there he is. There's my guy. It was so cool because sort of like some of the Macromedia products, you were programming learning objects. And of course there was a stage, and these were things that you would put on a stage. Help me out here if I get this wrong. And you were literally able to tell it, if you're on this stage in this environment, in this context, exhibit these things, these behaviors is what it was. So that, for example, it could be an environment in which Cristi comes to it and she's looking for certain things that she wants out of it because she's already put in, these are my goals for this learning. And I've come into it from a very different perspective. And the learning objects actually behave differently and exhibit different kinds of things. So forget why I went down this rabbit hole, but
Microtized learning, atomic.
there you go.
unit of-
Thank you. Pull it together for me. Yeah.
I'll be here all night.
Well, and so as we get more sophisticated with those tools, it's going to, I think, be increasingly possible for us to make this work.
The one thing you didn't say that I thought you would say about QM's role is that sometimes we get so caught up in frameworks and the models. So if it's Defink's significant learning framework, or if it's Bloom's taxonomy, it gets in the way of having the real
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah.
So you forgot that part.
I did, yeah. Well, I wanted you to say it.
Cristi is
since I'm
MJ's
chair.
accountability buddy.
If I'd seen the questions in advance.
Well,
I actually disagree a little. I
Oh,
find that
there you go.
those frameworks or any kind of constraint really helps to kind of focus the conversation and make it more productive. So I just feel like we can use standards and not just any standards, right? They have to be the right standards. They have to make sense for the communities that are using them. But I think that they can actually help drive innovation.
I would agree with that, but I wonder, can we use them in a way that we interchange them? Like I think about how many places I've been where it's a CLO versus an SLO, we get so caught up in the nomenclature that we lose the ability to be flexible and to really kind of move fluidly between those models. I
Well,
would definitely agree with
This
you.
is a little bit of the art versus the science conundrum,
Yeah.
right, for designers,
It
right? I
is.
mean, the rules are there to keep us bounded, but
Mhm.
made to be broken
Yep.
when appropriate. And maybe we're not doing enough rule breaking.
Hmm.
I think part of it, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be many technological assistance and solutions that we work with, but I think part of it has to be just, teaching our learners how to contextualize what they've learned, how to apply it, how to reflect on it, and how to communicate what they've learned. And so that is still very human, like that, that's a really personal kind of interaction that we still need to have.
Yeah, and I think at iDesign, we use the term structured flexibility all the time. And I was saying, I was introduced to QM in 2008, and I was saying, goodness, I found QM because I was talking to faculty who were just totally mesmerized by a blank page in an LMS and didn't know where to start. And then I had this structured flexibility, this framework to show to them and show them the research and say, but this is good design. We have a path we can go down together. Let's use this as a mechanism or a tool. And it made all the difference in the work that I did. So I'm just so grateful to this community that you continue to push on what that rubric is and can be in future iterations. 7th edition rocks. All right, so moving on. Good thing you had the questions in advance. So as we're getting ready to kind of think about how we can make this a little bit more provocative for everyone, I'm wondering, how do we have evidence of skill attainment, and how do employers know that they're getting what they want from our graduates?
This is Cristi first, then MJ.
No, it says sharing on here, segue to a line.
I think Luke is on tap.
Luke.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, how do we best have evidence of skill attainment? And how do we make sure employers are also getting what they want from our graduates? The pipeline to work is becoming more and more interesting. And I sit on the board at UNT for the Learning Technologies department, or the College of Information. And one of the things they're thinking about a lot is placement of students, mentorships, internships, pathways into careers. How can they open that door for their students? And so I wonder, what's that evidence piece? And then, what do the employers really want? And how are we getting to that information? And maybe some of you in a little while can share with us what you're doing at your institution to close those gaps.
I think it's two different things. I think there's lots of opportunity for research and some just kind of experimentation with our industry partners to see, are the learning experiences that we're providing actually making a difference for the employees that you're sending to us? And so there's research opportunity there. But I think there's also an opportunity for us to define what a quality learning experience is to industry. And I think, both of those things have to happen. And I think that's one thing that Quality Matters has done for, you were talking about working with faculty who had never taught online. That's what the standards have done for us, right? They've given us that structure and help us define what quality is. And it's not a, just, you mentioned the rubric revision. It's not a one and done. It's something that as, education evolves, that we, as a community, we provide input into that, and we advance it. And that'll have to be the same for this as well. But we have to communicate to the learners, the faculty, and business and industry, what does quality look like?
Is this your blockchain moment?
No, well, kind of. There are a lot of players in this space, and I'm sure many of you are also familiar with organizations like One Ed Tech and some of the others. I had the opportunity to chair their, I'll never forget the name of this subcommittee, Open Badges for Education Extensions, I think it was, back about 2017, 2018, somewhere thereabouts. And what we were doing was trying to create a set of standards for what gets baked into the badge. And then there was also a group that was working on the CLR. And the idea behind that was to provide that data that Shannon's talking about. What was the assessment plan? What was the evidence that the learner achieved these skills? Who is the badge issuer? And there were probably 5 or 6 different things. And what we came away with also was saying, and a badge issuer can't, that you could opt not to fill out one of those cells, but it would appear as a blank cell in the badge when you open it up and look under the hood. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of trouble getting the badging companies to actually adhere to these standards. This is, I think, a little bit outside of QM's work, but I think this is the kind of thing that would be very beneficial for employers to see. They don't need to see every single one. Their recruitment people aren't going to have the time to vet every single badge. But when they see there's as we were doing there for a while, the University System of Maryland badge in critical thinking that has all of this evidence of acquisition and skill, and it's been uploaded and it's all there under the badge. They can look at that once, maybe twice, and say, I know this is a rigorous experience, and that it's clear to me this person, I still have to talk to them, but it's clear to me this person at least had a good experience. When we think then about, and we've been talking to One Ed Tech and those folks there about, the ways in which QM can kind of dovetail, not get involved in that level of the technology piece, but where does QM's role begin and end in relation to that kind of other work that's going on nationwide and internationally to assure quality of these badges? And of course, the sweet spot for QM has always been on the design side. Yeah. So, are there things we ought to be looking at in the micro curricular arena that would help to inform the quality of this experience, that then could feed right into that kind of a badge that technologically can deliver all the good stuff that we put into it because of the way that we've assessed the learning, the kind of evidence we're having students upload. It's kind of the intersection of, the portfolio work that was going on there for so long in a mini kind of micro way. Yeah. So
I'm wondering how that feels to be the HR person with a sea of credentials coming at them, right? And at the One Ed Tech conference, I know Barry was in the room when they were talking about resumes coming in. Oh, yeah. Do you want to share that story?
Yeah, I'm gonna have a little trouble with it. But yeah, that was the Sherm story where they,
degrees and
yeah, you
remember that? So the story was that the HR professional was interested that the manager said that the individual did not need a degree.
Right.
But 19 out of 20 times,
Right.
the person who got the job had a degree
That's right. Yeah. You know,
because the screening, help me out there.
yeah, they're claiming, well, they're claiming that they're not using degrees
Right.
as the indicator, and that they're interested in something other than the degree. But even when the institution was made
fake,
up,
was fake, yeah.
they still went for the candidate with the degree over the ones
Yeah.
with the badges.
Yeah, that story sticks in my mind from
Yeah.
that event. And
Yeah, and I won't remember the numbers, but it was a, significant percentage.
I think there's one other thing here, because I think that's a really hard question to answer. I think when we think about credit for prior learning, e-portfolio, we've been trying to do this a long time. What I really like that I'm not hearing here yet, that Velocity Network is doing, is around agency. Why are we not allowing the individuals to have what they call self-sovereignty? So being able to have operability to take and move your credentials wherever you want and decide which ones you want to show and which ones you don't, and how you pull those together. And so it's been really interesting to see some of their work around this as well.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I wanted to get a certificate in something
Mhm.
recently, and I talked to the institution. They said, well, we need all of your transcripts. And I was like, all of them?
Yeah.
Really?
Mhm.
I'm out. Like,
Mhm.
I don't have time to go chase down. I've
Yeah.
been to a lot of schools. I don't have time to chase those down.
Yeah.
And I can go figure out another place to learn that information. So it's interesting.
It's, higher education, for all of our experience in online learning, we're still very much oriented toward traditional learners. And we need to get past that and realize that we're serving adult learners, and they have different needs and different backgrounds, and we need to adapt to serve that population.
Yeah. So our last probably big provocative question before we turn it over to all of you to ask away is QM talking to the right people at educational institutions to help lead this change, or beyond educational institutions? And from my purview, it's a yes. Talking to chief online officers and producing the Chloe report. It's another really fantastic piece of data that we can use in our hip pocket in order to advance those conversations. I also am really impressed with the President's Summit on online learning. But I also loved the award winner earlier, Kathy Chatfield's point when she said that she's actually leading from the middle. So I don't know if the middle, maybe that's what happens here, but there might be some additional opportunities in the middle. Luke, just kidding. MJ?
No, it's Luke.
Oh, okay, Shannon. Go ahead.
So are we talking to the right people? Yes, I mean, the QM community, I think, is the right community to be talking to. But I also think that we need to be talking to business and industry and bringing them into the conversation. They are the other stakeholder in the group.
And I think that's so much more true with micro-credentials than it's ever been.
Mhm.
This was sort of an aha I had recently, thinking back on my own experience looking for, post-secondary education. Never occurred to me whether an employer would care where I got the degree from. Of course, I wanted quality. I wanted to be sure it was accredited, but, at the end of the day, now employers are very much engaged in this and very eager to understand from their perspective too, what is the quality of this micro-credential?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond the educational institution, and I want to thank Quality Matters for the professional and the opportunity to partner. As of this week, we are a professional partner with D2L with Quality Matters. And so I think it goes beyond just the institutions, and having the opportunities to do master classes and the work that we do at D2L, to have an opportunity to look at the large number of institutions that we serve is really a pleasure. So I'm really looking forward to that partnership.
Perfect.
And I think from my, excuse me, from my perspective, one place where I do, and I mentioned this earlier, that I do think we're missing the boat is in helping senior leaders understand more about the value proposition here for Quality Matters. Some of you may know Barbara Bickelmeyer. She's provost at University of Kansas. She and I, we kind of came up through the instructional design path. She of course went fast track to administration, so she's risen to that level much more quickly. But You know, we had a long conversation about the value that instructional designers bring to strategic conversations at our institutions and the extent to which our senior leaders don't have a clue about the work we do, the way we think, the kinds of things that we engage in. So, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to expand that discussion as well, and potentially for Quality Matters to play a role in that. The new quality assurance framework, the work that Bethany, I saw her somewhere, has been doing in that space. You know, this is all really interesting work that I think senior leaders would be eager to learn more about.
Yeah, and I think instructional designers are people who like to solve problems. They're puzzle people. And so I think it might have been last year's QM when you may have said, we need to have instructional designers think about the student experience from the time they set foot on campus until they get through their entire student experience, and have them rethink where there are gaps and issues, bring them to the table. I think that was you at the keynote panel last year. Yes, it was brilliant. Yes.
I'm sure it wasn't Mark Milliron or one of those other smart people up there.
Definitely not. Yeah.
I can just add one more thing. You know, I think advisors are another,
Yeah.
another group that we leave out a lot of times. And those are folks who are really talking to students frontline, and they really understand what students are bringing and what challenges they're facing and what they're trying to do. And they really need to be at the table.
It's a good one.
Awesome. Well, we've set aside a few minutes for questions, and we're really interested to hear more questions, even what you're doing on your campuses. Thank you.
Hi, I loved what you said just now about IDs, instructional designers loving puzzles. And I have a bunch of IDs here at my table that I know would agree with that. And I am speaking from a K-12 context, and I have a piece of the puzzle to add to the conversation we're having here. And that is that I think that CTE programs, career and technical ed at the K-12 level, answers some of these questions. Of course, there are still puzzle pieces missing, but what I'm hearing here from this conversation, work opportunities, stackable completer courses, industry recognized credentials, these are all happening at a lot of K-12 virtual programs. And I do have a question. I'm getting there, but I wanted to tee myself up here. So I am wondering, so if we're doing if K-12 is doing these non-linear CTE programs, which are not just courses, I'm wondering if that connection jumps out to you as the panelists as well, and what you think about this possible opportunity of collaboration between K-12 and higher ed.
It's a fantastic question. I actually started out in K-12 in work-based learning and really doing all the job placement work. So you're right. I think the challenge I've found in terms of straddling that chasm from K-12 to higher ed is the regional focus. So many of the K-12 institutions are really looking at that community, that state, and so trying to replicate that model in a sustainable way is where it seems to break down. And we all know in this room, right, that we have some chasms between K-12 and higher ed that we long need to get over, but you're right, there's some really great things happening in that space.
And time again, your point is so well taken that, you know, I think about, oh gosh, higher ed's going to need to adopt technology. Well, K-12 has been doing it forever. Oh gosh, higher ed needs to be more sensitive to varying needs of differentiated instruction and varying needs of learners. Oh, well, K-12, you know, so I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot to be learned there, and that we should be doing a better job of building those collaborations. You've been probably doing more of that work, I suspect, than what you've been doing.
Not really, actually, not with K-12, no, but I definitely agree. And I, you know, I would add community colleges to that as well. Similar reasoning.
Yeah, the World Economic Forum report that came out not too terribly long ago addresses the need for more vocational education and CTE. And so I actually think there's a great opportunity for partnership, especially with the community colleges, right? Because you've got some of those tech pathways and maybe ag programs and other things that would be ideally matched one-to-one, even estheticians, cosmetology, right? So like that could be a really interesting opportunity to explore. Yeah. All right, more questions. I see a microphone.
Karen McKay has the microphone.
So I have a piece of the puzzle also and a question for you. So my piece of the puzzle goes to the conversation you were having about connecting the skills that we're providing with the industry. And so we at Community College of Philadelphia have been part of the Community College Growth Engine Fund, which is part of the Education Design Lab project. And in that, we've been using some human-centered design pieces, which include conversations with the employers. So we went to the employers as we were building and designing our micro pathways, and we provided them with an entry-level job description. And we said to them, okay, tell us exactly which skills you want these students to leave with and walk into your industry and your employment with, and which ones you're willing to train. And that's included both the soft skills, or we call them 21st century skills, as well as the technical skills. And we did it on a sheet called a T profile. So that's a little piece of the puzzle, and I'm happy to share information about that with anyone who's interested. And my question for you is around the skills forward approach. So many of us have faculty who have been long steeped in their traditions. And as we need to move towards this competency-based education model and the skills forward approach, how do we get the faculty to adopt a growth mindset and to reconsider how they're delivering this curriculum?
Woof,
Wow, that was a lot.
that's a
Okay.
good question.
Here I thought you were going to say that the employers couldn't actually articulate the skills that they wanted. That's where I thought that was going. Because we're seeing a lot of that too, but I know Education Design Lab does an amazing job facilitating those conversations. So I'm interested to learn more. Thank you, Karen. Well, I'll just real quickly start with, as we're thinking about a skills forward approach, it involves at least 6 components right now. And just one part of it is a lot of the technical infrastructure things we've been talking about, the conversations we're having with iDesign and D2L about their platforms. The rest of it is much more about what I said before around that Rosetta Stone, that it's about helping them understand we need to do a better job translating the academies into the things that we want our students to graduate being able to articulate what they know and are able to do. I think everybody wants that for our students. So what are the things right now, even without any of the rest of this stuff, that we could start incorporating? So if we know that this program is supposed to cover these 5 skills, where do we name them? Where are they in our rubrics? Are we training, in our case, the adjuncts that are delivering our courses to understand? We want you to point to those skills. We want you to mention them in your feedback. We want you to be talking about them in your own experience with them. Excuse me, I forget I have a mic on. And begin deliberately designing that into the courses, incorporating more experiential learning opportunities. There's some great tools out there, again, talking about the new technologies. Forage, that does simulated work-based learning that really is connected to real employers. Bringing those kinds of things in, even without having to have all of the overhead of a gig-based internship and, all those kinds of things. You can start bringing those kinds of things into the classroom to begin actually, driving this conversation. And that's incremental change. That feels like a logical thing to a lot of, at least our faculty. And they're beginning to sort of resonate with this idea. No, nothing else is going away at this point. All that familiar stuff that you're used to is still there. We're just translating this a little bit differently for our students.
I think it's a little bit of a both end kind of answer to that. I think, some faculty are going to come to this discussion and be really against the idea of higher education purpose being to churn out, good little workers, right? That's not, it's about much more than that. And I think we need to acknowledge that there are benefits of higher education that are beyond, economic, right? But we also have to acknowledge and be realistic about the rising cost of tuition, state disinvestment in higher education, that more of the cost of this is on students' back. And the average wage of a bachelor's degree holder has not kept up pace with that. And so students have a right to ask about the return on investment, and they have a right to think of it that way. And I think we need to, bring that to the conversation and balance those things. It's not an either or.
And we come to it from an employer side. So just a simple case in point, Leah Sharan Davis has been working with a number of different institutions to put together pathways for students to be able to come work with us as interns, get on the job training experience, with the university allowing us to pay them, which that's like a whole challenge all by itself, and awarding them credit. So it's like a supervised internship as a part of their degree pathway, because in the world of work, the jobs are posted and you have to have experience. Well, you can't get a job unless you have experience, right? So we're trying to create an opportunity where we can, both diversify our staff. We're partnered with MSIs, HSIs, and hopefully soon an HBCU, maybe in Maryland. But there's this great opportunity for us to get, new talent, young talent, and then upskill them within our organization so they learn the ways that we work. And those internships have turned into employment for those individuals after they finish their degree program. So slightly different take on it, but.
Well, and I'll offer just having the conversation, meeting them where they are. Remember working with a College of Business faculty and hearing two accounting faculty talk about, well, I teach accounting 1 and you teach accounting 2, but students aren't covering that hurdle. So really getting honest about, well, what's happening in your course that they're not prepared for your course. Like, can we have some real honest dialogue? Well, we have to cover all these topics, right? So really being able to have that fundamental conversation where they are to then be able to get to this place.
And Cristi, that brings me back to the Align software,
Yeah.
because once we have all that data loaded in, we'll be able to say, actually, you're touching that standard and that skill 87 times in this
Yeah.
course and 0 in this one, right? So then we can
Right.
start looking at how we redesign or improve courses.
So Sasha has a question, but I think we should vote about whether she gets to ask it.
There are 5 minutes left.
Can I ask you really quick?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What was the last thing each of you upskilled yourselves on? And where did you go to upskill yourself?
Oh, boy, that's a hard question.
I can start because on the plane on the way here, I started my PADI scuba diver certification training because I'm going on a cruise next week and I'm going to become a scuba diver.
I would say in the last 6 months, it's been AI, really
Yeah.
spending intentional time around understanding. I mean, ChatGPT, like what is, I mean, like we're so far beyond that,
Yeah.
right? So spending time intentionally around AI for me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
Did
Def-
anybody take structured learning? So what?
Yeah, I took a course from Kale called From the Ground Up. And it's all about, standing up your alternative credential program.
How about you?
I'm a non-completer of 2 courses.
Oh, yeah.
actively.
MOOCs.
But you know, what we did forget to say, we did do the updated QM rubric,
Well,
higher education.
Yes.
Addition. So, that training
Yeah.
was necessary.
Yeah. And all the trainings we get every month on the job,
Mhm.
data
So,
security and all that.
so any other questions from the
Yeah.
audience? We have time for one more. Stephen?
Sasha did a great job bridging to my question. So that we talked about getting faculty on board. And when we think about the history of how we got faculty on board with teaching with technology in the classroom, we did it by getting them in a classroom with technology. When we got them on board with doing online learning, we had them do an online workshop as a student in an online workshop.
And then we had COVID.
And then we had COVID. Well, when we look at micro-credentialing, I think that's one of our problems. Our faculty do not know what that
Yes,
looks
That's a
like.
good point.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with that is, it would be wonderful we had some sort of national standards to go to where we could link our faculty development as a micro-credentialing program that linked to national behaviors, competencies, and things like that, because that's one of the things I've been trying to do for the last several years in my community college district is to bring us to a point where our faculty development is more competency-based. It's more micro-credentialed, but I can only connect it to things I make up. I can't connect it to anything else bigger than me. And I think that's the conversation we're having with our students and our administration on micro-credentialing, is that we're connecting this to 21st century skills with Ed Design Lab. But when it comes to faculty development, what can we connect it to?
That's good.
And that's the question.
Yeah. When we started at the system level, a digital badging initiative on career ready skills back in 2015, we actually consulted with Dan Hickey out of Indiana University. Had done a lot of work with the MacArthur Foundation on all of that early work in badging. And he finally said to us, this is a case where if you build it, they will come, because until then, it's really an abstraction. And we found that so much to be true. Once we'd finally set us, so we went with the NACE competencies. You guys are all, I know them like the back of your hand now. It was all new to me at that point. And we laid them out. We literally had badges. We started identifying what all I forget, we didn't call them competencies.
No.
We had something else, but dimensions under the
Yes.
badges. And all of a sudden you'd see eyes light up. Oh, we have, this would be great with our Gen Ed program. Oh gosh, this would be great with our interdisciplinary degree programs or our research programs. Yeah, you guys, you were at UMUC at the time, did it in a doctoral program, you know, and suddenly the light bulb went off. I think you're absolutely right that it's a little too abstracted right now.
Yeah.
And the value proposition is way too hard to articulate. You know, you kind of have to spend 10 minutes. Okay, well, it's going to help with transfer. It's going to help with PLA. It's going to help with this. And it's like, yeah, it sounds like a lot of work though. I'm going back to my office. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We could really use some guidance and some talking points and very clear direction about what do we mean when we're talking about stackable? They don't even understand, you know, they barely understand Bloom, right? Much less the ways in which we all think very systematically about the design of instruction and cycles. And, you know, then you get your assessment, you move on to the next block, right? That's not really on their minds.
We have a position posted right now for a director of alternative credentials. So we're starting up a unit, and the first thing that I'm doing is putting together a faculty advisory committee. And I want to pull faculty from each college to inform. We're going to have to create a whole bunch of policies. Right now, the Oregon State website says we don't accept a lot of credit for prior learning. That's so that's the challenge ahead of me. But we're, you know, we need faculty involvement in order to make those changes.
Yeah.
It's a change management problem.
And just in case anybody didn't hear, Shannon is hiring.
Thank you.
So if you follow her on LinkedIn, those positions are posted. Yeah.
Also instructional design positions. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank our panelists for sharing their experiences. Our goal was to stimulate questions and dialogue with all of you, and hope that you will continue to ponder these questions and the ideas that were raised during the panel. Reach out to any of us if you want to stay in touch or bounce ideas off your colleagues. And thank you to the QM
And
community.
thank you to you.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
That was a lot of fun.